just a wild fantasy romp through the eyes of a lunatic that were not my eyes. Well, I say that. Some of the things on there are loosely based on the truth, but was I really hanging out at the Berlin Wall singing with David Hasselhoff and getting Jerry Halliwell to wear the Union Jack dress when I was backstage at the Brits? Well, that's up to the reader. You can decide. I mean, I've been to the Brits, I've been backstage, and I have hung around with the Hoff over the years, but it's got some, how shall I say, some fantasy, but more fantasy than fact. Fact or fantasy, make up your mind.
Hi everyone, my name is David Hill, and welcome to my new celebrity podcast, Schmoozing, where I talk to some of my favourite people and some of my celebrity friends. Now, this episode is brought to you by the fabulous people at 12A Studios, and here, controlling all things technical splendidly as always, is Mr. Jack Palista. How are you, Jack?
Well, I'm a bit sore actually this week, David, because I've been back rehearsing for a ballet version of the classic children's story, The Teddy Bear's Picnic, and I'm absolutely loving it. Ballet was always my first love, and it's great to be dancing again, even if it's over Zoom because of what's going on in the world at the moment. But if any of our listeners want to come and watch, if they have children, they might want to come and watch the show. We'll be touring throughout the summer from May the 30th onwards, and you can get tickets at letstalldance.co.uk. Now, how was your week, David?
It's been very exciting, actually, Jack, because we've had a lot of contractors and builders and decorators in the garden, and we took delivery yesterday of one enormous hot tub.
Oh, my goodness.
I know, it's very exciting. So it takes about 18 hours to heat up. So we haven't been in it yet.
Oh,
but
ready for tonight?
Ready for tonight, my wedding anniversary. We will be in that hot tub. And actually, the drink in front of me, which you've got to admit, Jack, is a work of art.
It is a show.
It is incredible. Is actually in preparation for this evening. So I have made... in preparation for my first plunge into the hot tub, I've made a pink teenie, Jack.
Oh, I love that.
A pink teenie.
And what is it?
Well, a pink teenie is the body of the pink teenie. Let's say that the main ingredient is Pinkster Gin. Our friends at Pinkster Gin, who very kindly sent me a bottle.
Lovely.
So that I could try it. You then just mix it with elderflower pressé. I've got some Folkington's elderflower pressé, crushed ice, some raspberries, a sprig of mint, and off you go. And it is well and truly doing its thing, Jack. I can recommend it.
What a drink to celebrate your anniversary with. So happy anniversary to you and Lucas.
Thank you.
Now, we are coming to the end of Series 1 of Schmoozing, and we've loved bringing you a slice of showbiz each week. And as always, we want to thank our listeners for their comments, reviews, and subscriptions. If you haven't already subscribed, or you're listening to us for the first time, why not do it now? It's only a click of a button. So, David, this week it gives me the utmost pleasure to introduce the celebrity guest. We all loved him as the host of Funhouse. He's been entertaining us on the waves for over 4 decades, and he was one of my childhood heroes. It's the legendary Pat Sharp.
So to our listeners out there, I am joined today through the miracle of technology, because he's actually sitting in his own radio studio, by the legendary Pat Sharp. Pat, how are you?
Well, that's very kind of you, David. I don't think it was a big enough intro, though.
Do you want me to do that again, Pat?
No, it was way too much. Legendary is flashed around these days as a word much too often, and I don't think I fit into that status at all. More like legend as opposed to legend, I think.
Well, I you see, now I deliberated over legendary or iconic was another word I thought I would use, Pat.
That's nice. I see myself as an icon on your screen. That's probably the best I'll get. So there you go.
Well, listen, thank you so much for agreeing to to be a special guest on my podcast. Are you ready to be schmoozed, Mr. Sharp?
I'm always ready to be schmoozed by you, so schmooze away, David, and make it a good one, because I like a bit of schmoozing, but you'll have to work hard to schmooze in style. But I believe this podcast does just that, what it says on the tin.
Well, I've got a sneaky feeling, Pat Sharp, that it's going to be a fantastic interview. That's all I can say.
See what you did? Yeah.
Introducing the theme straight away. Listen, I thought it would be, I'm going to break with the format slightly, Pat, because I thought it would be only a great thing to do if we just started off with a few quick fire, almost game show style questions to just kind of break the ice into this episode of Schmoozing. And I'm attaching points to these, Pat, so there are stakes. We are playing for stakes here.
Okay, lovely. I love steaks. Yeah, I don't eat much red meat, but I'll go for it.
Right, okay, we're going to start off. For 1 point, Pat, how long have you and I known each other?
Oh, wow, that's really unfair. All right. Well, I haven't got many anniversary cards, but anyway, you obviously don't go. Let me think. It's within this century, I would say, but I think it's quite early on. I would say we've known each other a good, I reckon, 13 years.
Do you know you are very, very close? I'm impressed with that. Actually, I thought you would err on a sort of slightly lower number, but actually it's 12 years, and that leads to my next question, Pat, because I know it's 12 years because it relates to where we first met. So for a second point, Pat Sharp, where did we meet?
Now that is an interesting one. Oh yeah, I reckon it was at a do at Linda Lusardi's.
You are spot on. I'm impressed. I didn't think you'd get that. It was indeed. In fact, it was Linda Lusardi's 50th birthday party. Now, Pat, this is for a bonus point. Who introduced us?
Who introduced us? Was it somebody like Eamon Holmes, maybe?
No, I would have loved it if it had been Eamon Holmes. I mean, it would probably make the story slightly more interesting. But actually, the person who introduced us was a legend in his own field. I mean, our listeners won't have heard of him, but certainly in the world of light entertainment and as publicists and agents go, it was, in fact, the wonderful Mr. Keith Bishop, Pat, that introduced us.
The Bishop of Soho.
The Bishop of Soho introduced us. So, yes, I'm afraid you don't get the bonus point. Now, here's testing you, Pat. What was the first ever live DJ gig we worked on together?
Wow. Oh. Do you know what? That one I have no idea because there's been so many, so no idea on that one either. I'm not doing very well, am I?
Well, I can tell you that the first one that we worked on together was an event called the Snowman Spectacular Ball in Brighton, and it was for Chestnut Tree House Children's Hospice, and it's fairly safe to say you rocked the room, Mr. Sharp. You did incredibly well. And that leads on to a slight trick question, which is, for a bonus point, what was the second live gig we worked on together?
Okay, so it was the Chestnut Ball the following year.
Yes, it was indeed. It was the Snowman Spectacular Ball for Chestnut Tree House Children's Hospice. And the reason being, Pat Sharp, is because you were so incredible at the first one that they did indeed rebook you to come back. Now, running on that theme, Pat, what is the next live DJ gig that we are working on together this year in 2021?
Okay, well, this kind of like answers the same one that we've just done because it involves two in a row, because technically we didn't do it last year but we should have done, but we are doing it this year because it's okay. And it's July the 10th and it's the Sussex Gin Fest, the UK's biggest gin festival at Board Hill.
Wonderful, unashamed plug there for our gin festival. Wonderful, fantastic, and yeah, it is indeed Sussex Gin Fest, and that will be on the 10th of July. Just a couple of questions left, Pat, and you could make up the points in these last couple. This next question, I'm hoping you'll get the answer to this. It's a slightly random question, but there we go. Can you describe the front door to Noel Edmonds' house?
Wow, what, at Crinkly Bottom?
Well, his own house.
Ah, so I think this is something from my book, isn't it? I think
might be.
Well, I've been yeah, all right. So I should point out that for listeners who don't know that my recent book, or current book for that matter, because I've only ever had one book, so it'll be my only book ever, is a spoof memoir. So therefore, some things in it do have a little bit of untruth about them. But I did go to Crinkly Bottom many times, so to speak, and come through the door when I rang the doorbell at Noel's house there. And I don't even remember what that door was like, to be honest with you, because it was obviously the back of a stage door, which they then opened up, and Noel was standing there and said, "Look at your hair." And I went, "Well, you can talk." And, we had some banter on the steps. But I think you'd probably know more, having had a copy of the book and hopefully read it, that you'd know more about Noel's door in the book as I described Addie's actual house, because I can't remember. No, you've got me again.
Well,
long-winded answer.
Well, it introduces one of the themes which I'm, of course, going to pick up on later on, Pat, which will be your book. But you've done a wonderful segue without knowing it into my final question, because my final question is for a whopping 10 points. You can make it all back in this question, actually, Pat, and it's not even a question. I mean, I don't really see how you can get it wrong. So our final question is, can you give our schmoozing listeners some exclusive, indeed, and I am using the word iconic now, Pat Sharp hair advice?
Sussex Gin Fest, July 10, Board Hill. Did you edit that in, David?
Brilliant.
Okay, some hair advice. Let me think. Yes, I would say after waiting a long time to have my hair cut and then finally getting it done on April 12th, I was one of the first people at the hairdressers on that Monday morning. I would say that it's worth keeping it sophisticated, suave, and if you do have enough hair and you're not a slaphead, then just keep it flowing. Keep those locks flowing, because when my hair got really long during lockdown, when I did go on April the 12th, that Monday morning, I didn't just have it all shaved off and go short again. I kept it long. Not as long as 1987, but certainly flowing. And I think that it keeps you looking younger. If you have your hair a little bit longer, you do look a bit younger. I'm turning 60 this year, and people say I don't look a day over 59.
You certainly don't. Well, that's sound advice. That's sound advice for people. But I think it's fair to say, Pat, you're not advising that they go as long as the mullet.
No. I think it probably had its time and has been resigned to a trailer park somewhere in America.
Yes. I'm sure you're right. Pat, thank you. Well, I think you definitely certainly made it up in the end with those 10 points. I'm going to give you those 10 points. I want to talk to you initially about your DJ career, because I think that's fair to say that's where it all started. And one of the things I wanted to ask you, Pat, was I suppose this is my own interpretation of you as an artist, as a performer, but I just wanted to see whether you would agree with me, in fact, that of all the things you've done in your career, would you say that at the very heart and soul of who you are is really a DJ?
I would absolutely say that for me, yeah, because it is. But people don't think that. In general, most people, if they were listening to this now, would be saying, no, he's the guy from Funhouse. It always comes back to doing kids' TV, and that's more, which is weird, because technically I only spent 10 weeks of my life doing that show, because it ran for a decade, and it was the most successful kids' TV show I think that ITV or BBC ever had. It's just iconic, and I'm really lucky to have been associated with it. But I only spent 1 week a year doing it. In 1 week, we would go to Glasgow, myself and the twins, and in 7 days, we would do 14 shows. That's 3.5 months worth of shows, which is 14 Fridays, and that was the series for each year. So we would do 2 shows a day, 2 times 7 is 14, and then I would come home and go back to work. I'd just take a week off Capital Radio and go and do the show. So for something that only took me 10 weeks of my life, as opposed to presenting and radio and DJing, which has been 40 years, it's really odd that is considered to be more relatable to me. But yeah, I would agree with you. For me, it's being a radio presenter and a DJ and a live DJ, which I've become more of over the last decade or so.
You mentioned, I've got to go with it, because you mentioned Funhouse, and I think it's fair to say, Pat, isn't it, that it's become a cult. Well, that's what it says on my notes anyway, Pat Cult. I just wondered why you think it's so funtabulous.
Hold it together.
Yeah. Why you think this show became so funtabulous and so successful? What was it about it that has made it this thing that follows you around in your career?
Well, yeah, it is, and you're very kind to mention that. And I have people come up to me at gigs and stuff. You'll get a great big bloke about 6'6", built really large, and he'll come and go, "You, Pat," and I'll go, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." He go, "Yeah, you made my childhood," and I go, "Well, it's probably just as well." So, but to have somebody like that, maybe if it was a girl, you'd go, "Oh, that's nice. You thank you, sweetie," or whatever. But when it's a great big guy, you go, "Wow, that's good. That's really good. Thank heavens." But it's so good, and it probably stood the test of time for many reasons. I would say, first of all, David, one, because there wasn't that many TV channels. Nobody had the internet. Nobody had a mobile phone. Nobody had social media. We were happy with a hoop and a stick, and you used to come home after school, chuck your school bag down on a Friday afternoon. You didn't have to do your homework because the weekend was ahead, and you could do the homework, Sunday afternoon or over the weekend at any time you liked. And you just turned on the television, and there was this bright, fun-filled show with two blonde twin cheerleading girls and my enormous mullet and, contestants that everybody dreamed of being, to be able to run through the funhouse and play all the Gungy games and drive go-karts around a TV studio and then pick up on prizes that took them to like Niagara Falls and stuff. So it was very cool for its time, and it sort of stood the test of time. There are many, many parents today who get in touch with me saying that they used to love the show when they were 12 or 13 years of age, and now their kids won't let them take it off the planner where they've recorded it from, episodes on Challenge TV, or they watch it on YouTube all the time, and it's just moved on to the next generation because their kids are saying there's nothing like that for them these days on TV. So I think it did the trick because it was bright and colourful, and we didn't have all the distractions that we have these days with everybody looking at their phone every 2 seconds.
Do you know what, Pat? I can remember, because I've watched it since, of course, but I didn't watch Funhouse as a child, because actually I think my generation slightly missed it. But actually I remember saying to a couple of my colleagues when we had the office in Covent Garden, and I remember saying to Dan and Ryan, really casually, just very casually, just mention it, and I just happened to say to them in the morning, I said, "Oh, chaps, if the doorbell goes, it'll be Pat Sharp. I've got a meeting with him." And the reaction from them was just incredible, and I've never forgotten it, because they looked at me and they said, "What, the real Pat Sharp?" And I said, well, yes, but Pat Sharp that does Funhouse. I said, yes. And they were just absolutely, because of course they were a generation that had watched it as a child. They were saying, well, we'll be able to have a photograph with him. Do you think he will do a... Of course he will, absolutely. And I've never forgotten that. And like you said, it's because of Funhouse.
The reason why Ryan and co were excited was because when they watched Funhouse, they didn't have a job working with you, and they didn't have rent or a mortgage or relationship or anything like that to worry about. They just had their school bag, which they chucked down. Mum made them a Marmite sandwich, and there it was on the telly. So if you remember, which everybody does, something from your carefree days before you had all the things that adults have to deal with, then it sticks out in your mind and you have an amazing affinity with that person who you grew up with, rather than, say, for example, Graham Norton or somebody like that who people have seen on the telly when they were older and then have just said, like, yeah, it's brilliant, it's Graham Norton, love him, isn't he great? But if you've got a kids' TV presenter stuck in your memory bank, they'll be there forever.
No, I totally agree. Well, the $6 million question, Pat, is will there ever be a reboot?
Well, we are in talks with a number of people. I say we, from a point of view that the show is being considered to be brought back in some shape or form. It would have to be modernised for a different century. So it would have to change a bit, and it wouldn't have me as a presenter or the girls, I don't think. We might be some sort of cameo role in it if it did. But the main thing that we are trying to do is to have this adult, immersive, interactive attraction out there for hen do's and stag do's and parties, so that adults who never got on the show can actually go into a great big warehouse and play in a fun house and drive the go-karts and pick up on prizes and get gungy and messy, come out the other end, have a drink, have a dance, and enjoy a whole experience for an adult of Funhouse. So that's what we are working on. But it would be similar to the Crystal Maze one that's been around for a few years. So we are hopeful for that. But it's been put rather on hold due to COVID, obviously. me, so things have slowed up a lot with that. But hopefully we'll get back on track very soon.
Well, as you know, I do in my other life. I do a lot of I book a lot of corporate gigs, and I think that would be an absolute surefire winner, Pat. You know, I think it would be very, very popular.
Yeah, I think it would have to be for people of a certain age, as you say, though. You know, for people who remember the show. So if you're sort of 30 plus, 30 to 40 or so, and onwards would be good. But now, any 20-year-old would go, don't know it, because, it finished in sort of 1999, 2000 was the last episode, so they wouldn't know that. So it's quite funny, really. I've noticed that at my gigs when I was obviously doing them before pre-COVID and stuff, and people would come up to me, a good few years ago, be a young girl, sort of similar age to me, and would say, like, oh, can I get a photo? You go, yeah. Then suddenly you got young girls come up to you going, hi, can I get a photo? It's for my mum. I go, yeah, sure, yeah, she loves you. All right, that's nice, thanks. And now I've had, yeah, hi, can I get a photo for my grandma? She thinks you're brilliant. And it's just going from bad to worse, and soon it'll be like, oh, can I get a photo? I need to put it on my great-grandma's grave. She used to really like you. And it's just going to keep on going.
Oh, funny. I just want to go back in time and talk to you about your time at the Bee, because for anybody that knows you, knows that you broke into Radio 1, I mean BBC Radio 1, at the tender age of 20. And I just wondered how you did that. I mean, how did that happen, Pat?
Well, it sounds like I went in through a broken window when you said you broke into Radio 1. I smashed my way in through the window, went up the stairs, pulled Simon Bates out of his seat and went, good morning, love, it's me, it's my turn. Actually, I didn't know I had a very squeaky voice age 20. I was like, hello, it's me, don't really know what I'm doing. Oh, which button is this? But I was at the right place, right time. I had a manager who was my agent manager for 30 years. And when I was obviously 19, I started with him, and he got me a job because he looked after so many of the Radio 1 DJs. He sent my demo to the boss. The boss said, yeah, let's give him a shot. And he put me on in the afternoon when I was 20 years old, covering Steve Wright. And that was before there was a million radio stations around and TV channels, and there was no social media and no internet and nothing. So I think I had an audience of about 17 million people on my first show.
I mean, that is absolutely incredible, isn't it? I mean, still Radio 1 is still, I think, it's sort of, the holy grail in many ways, isn't it? In terms of becoming a radio presenter. I mean, that's ultimately where you'd want to move your career to, and you just casually started there at 20, Pat. It's incredible.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, as a 20-year-old, anybody would have wanted to be on Radio 1 for sure, yeah. Ironically, I lived in London, and my favourite station was Capital, because Capital was just London at the time, and I was more impressed by that station than I was with Radio 1. So I think when my agent said, you're going to sit in for Steve Wright and be on Radio 1 for a week, I think I went, oh, all right, but can't I be on Capital? So I wasn't very grateful.
Well, Pat, I'm just wondering, actually, whether you've actually, whether Jack has sent you a copy of my questions, because you are beautifully segueing from my into my next question, really, because I just wanted to ask you.
No, I haven't. No.
I know it's. I mean, it's just the chemistry, Pat, we've always had. I think that's all I can say.
Always, baby.
And let people draw their own conclusions. I just wanted to ask you.
As I always said, once a cult, always one.
The good thing is I know your wife likes me, so I can get away with it.
She does.
She does. I just wondered, you've obviously had a whole host of what I've termed in my notes prestigious residencies at stations like Capital, Heart, Smooth, and many, many, many more. And I just wondered, from your radio career, what's been your favourite stint? What's been the I suppose the station you've enjoyed working on the most?
Well, because we segued beautifully into that, as we do segue with the records that we play, it would be Capital, because that was the station I grew up listening to, and I ended up from doing a project on the history of commercial radio for my history O-level, and standing outside Capital Radio many, many days and nights waiting for the DJs to come down those beautiful stairs that led up to the Euston Tower studios, and ended up working with them all. I walked into Capital Radio ready to do my first show, and walked into a studio, and there was Roger Scott, and he was sitting there, and he was playing records and doing what he did, and then he opened the mic. He goes, right, we got the new boy on tonight. What's on the show, Pat? And I just looked at him and went, oh, you can't be speaking to me. This isn't real. This just can't be happening. And I don't think anything came out. I think I went... Nothing really happened, but and to sit in for Kenny Everett. Kenny Everett was off on holiday, and I got to do his show and play in all the competitions with his Speedy CD and all the things he used to do. And I thought, this is the competition that I'm now playing and asking people to call in for, that I tried to call in for the best part of 10 years and never got through to. So to get the chance to do that and work with your heroes, and to this day, having worked with Simon Bates and David Jensen and Mike Reed and all these iconic people. I worked with Alan Freeman and Kenny, and so many people have now passed away. So Capitol for me was definitely the best times, because I was there for a decade, and it was a time when it was not doing very well. But then when I joined, with the likes of Tim Westwood and Pete Tong and Jackie Brambles and Foxy and loads of other people, we really helped take that station up a notch. And Chris Tarrant started on breakfast, and I followed him on mid-mornings, and it became the biggest listenership in its history. So for me, definitely Capitol, and then indeed what I have now with Greatest Hits Radio, because I'm actually playing the biggest hits of the 70s, 80s and 90s, working with Mark Goodyear and Simon Mayo and Paul Gambaccini and Alex Lester and Andy Crane and Jenny Powell and all my other contemporaries. So we're getting a second crack at the whip. So those two for me equal.
Oh, that's brilliant. I just wondered, would you agree with me? I think personally, in my lifetime, I think radio sort of lost its cool, lost its way for a little while, but it's become uber trendy to do again, hasn't it, Pat? Would you agree with me?
Yeah, I think it must be quite cool to do again, because there are so many people now who've come from television, celebrities who now do radio and perhaps never wanted to be on the radio. And they're now on the air. They're not all, or hardly any of them, I think, are operating the actual desk and doing the work, but they are sitting behind a mic and speaking. So, I guess they find it quite attractive. And as a job, it probably means, you don't have to shave or have a haircut. But then again, that's not strictly true either, is it? Because so much of radio these days is done via the fact that there's massive lights and cameras in the studio, and everything is then broadcast on social. So people see radio as well as hear it, don't they? It's a really important part of it these days.
I just wondered, as we're on the radio theme, I've got to ask you, there's this kind of competition going on at the moment, isn't there, really, with Virgin, the new Virgin Radio and Radio 2, where you've got Chris Evans, and now they've managed to get their hands on Graham Norton. I just wondered what you thought about that. What your thinking was on that.
Well, my thinking is the fact that it's a commercially attractive opportunity for both Chris and Graham to go to Virgin, because they can probably do other things that they would have been stuck on within the BBC, I suppose. I know that, obviously he's still got his TV contract, Graham Norton, so he does his TV show, his chat show. But moving across to Virgin, I believe his big wish was to be able to operate the desk, which he didn't do at Radio 2. Somebody else operated the desk, and it was just his mouth saying the words and somebody else firing in the songs. And here he's learnt to operate the desk, and he plays all the stuff in and does it all himself. So perhaps he actually wanted to be a hands-on presenter. But look, people go to other stations and they move on because they see opportunities that maybe they can, do the job in a different way, earn more money, perhaps play different types of music, present in a different style, number of things. Who knows? But obviously Virgin's got a minute audience. Chris Evans' breakfast show audience on Virgin is minute compared to Zoe Ball's, because she's on Radio 2 and it's still a bigger station.
Yeah, I suppose it's going to be interesting to see what happens, whether that audience grows, because clearly that's the mandate that Virgin have got, isn't it? You kind of procure this enormous talent and these big names, and hopefully some of their audience follow them, and you grow the audience numbers, which is kind of what you were saying you did on Capitol, really.
Well, yeah, Chris has grown the audience immensely, really big, and it's the biggest audience of the day by far on Virgin. I think it drops off completely after he finishes, but he's still got a long way to go to catch up Radio 2, because a lot of the Radio 2 listeners stay with the radio station, not necessarily with the presenter.
I'm just going to press pause on this interview to bring you some very special news from our wonderful sponsors at Sussex and Surrey Gin Fest. And who better to bring the news but a legend of local radio, the First Lady of Sussex and star of Brighton Family Panto, the fabulous Alison Ferns. Hey, Alison.
Hello, it's Alison Ferns here from BBC Radio Sussex and BBC Radio Surrey. Join me as I host the UK's largest outdoor gin festivals in Sussex on the 10th of July and Surrey on the 11th of September. We've got a whole host of artisan gin distillers on site for you to discover, as well as gourmet food and first-class entertainment. Tickets are going fast, so make sure to book now at sussexginfest.com or surreyginfest.com. We look forward to sipping a gin and tonic or two with you this summer.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about was, the passage from radio to television, and you've obviously done lots and lots and lots of TV, way too much TV for me to mention on this podcast because I'd be here all day listing your many credits, Pat, on television. And then, you've obviously mentioned the most famous thing that you're known for, which was Funhouse. But I do want to mention I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, because that's such a high-profile show, and obviously you did that. You were in one of those seasons, and I just wanted to know. I mean, a bit of an open-ended question to begin with, really. What the experience was like for you? How did you find it?
Well, it's 10 years ago. It's a decade ago at the end of this year, believe it or not. I was in the class of 2011, so time flies. I was asked to do it 2 or 3 times before, turned it down every time, didn't want to do it, and then one day I came home and my wife said, "Oh, you're going for your jungle medical tomorrow," and I went, "No, I've just told you I'm not doing it." She goes, "No, you are. I've told Michael you're doing it, my manager." And I said, "No, I'm not." And she goes, "You are." She goes, "I am going to go to Australia first class on that plane, and I'm going to stay in the Versace hotel, and you are my only route in, so you are going."
I love Monica for that. I didn't know that. That's brilliant. So she literally made your mind up for you, Pat.
Yes, a bit like everything, really. Like my credit card bill. I go, "What's this? What's that? What's that? Oh, right. Oh, you made your mind up. Okay." So, so it was an amazing experience. I'm so pleased she did it. She chose very well, made lifelong friends from it. No, seriously, I absolutely loved it. We made lifelong friends from being there, and I absolutely embraced being in the jungle because I got involved, and it's an incredible experience when you think that only about 250 people have ever done this, ever.
I mean, you referenced that you've made some lifelong friends. Who are they, Pat? Come on, we love some celebrity gossip on this podcast. So, spill the beans. Who are these lifelong friends?
Okay, well, so one of the people I was in the jungle with was Jessica Jane Clement, and she was engaged at the time to Lee Stafford, the hairdresser. And Lee and Jess, obviously happily married since then, and have 4 kids and are very, very good friends of ours. And they were at our daughter's wedding, and so were Mark Wright's parents and Mark himself, Mark and Michelle. So Mark Senior and Carol, they're probably our best friends because when Monica was in the hotel, hanging around waiting for me to come out, losing 1.5 stone in weight because I had nothing to eat, like Mark and Carol's son, and we were starving. They were all in the hotel smashing back the wine and having some marvellous food. So they got to know each other very well, and we've become best pals.
So I'm just signalling over to Jack, as you've just given me that answer, Pat, just to say, Jack, if ever we need Mark Wright on Schmoozing, you know where to go. I've just got one final question on your TV career. I just wondered, actually, Pat. You said that you refused I'm a Celebrity several things that you'd like to do now.
Absolutely not, David. No. I have done The Jungle, and for me, that's the biggest, and I've done a few others over the years. I was on a show called The Games about 15 years ago or so, where we all did Olympic sports and got taught to dive off a 10-metre board and throw the javelin and all sorts of things. And were trained by the likes of Fatima Whitbread to throw the javelin, so that was pretty cool. So I think, really, once you've done The Jungle or Strictly, I don't think you should do both, even though a number of people have. I just don't need to be a guinea pig to anybody anymore and turn up at the opening of an envelope to say, "Hey, run through this hoop," because I've had a crack and it's been fun, and I'm very happy to do what I do for a living rather than have to go on reality shows.
And actually, in terms of what you do now, how important that live DJ work is, Pat, in your career right at this moment?
Well, live DJ work for me, as in a DJ actually playing in front of people, is really important. And I haven't done it for so long because of COVID. I can't wait to get back from June 21st. I think my first gig's on the 25th, on the Friday, and then on the 26th, and then all the way up till, did you know I'm doing one on July the 10th at the Sussex Gin Fest? Not sure if you're aware of that, but I just thought I'd throw it in anyway. So, you know, it's very important to me. I love playing in front of people, and I cannot wait to get back and be a live DJ. You know, I'm on a boat in Ibiza in October doing a fun boat gig out there, and I've got tons of gigs lined up, 78 of which have been postponed and moved forward from last year. So it's my big thing. It's what I do. It's most of my living, most of my earnings, and most of my fun as well. Love it.
I have to say that you know, in my lifetime, in my career, Pat, when anybody ever talks to me, and it could be a charity looking for a DJ at a gala event, black tie event, it could be a corporate, it could be a festival client. If anybody ever says to me, you know, we want a DJ to finish the night, it could be a restaurant, it could be, you know, which you've done for me in the past. But the first thing I say to people is, have you ever considered Pat Sharp? Because you are so brilliant at what you do live. And for anybody out there that has never seen you live, you just are brilliant. You give people what they want. You play the tunes they want to dance to. And what I love about you as well, and it's almost going back to the beginning of our conversation and the fan base you've built through programs like Funhouse, is if people want a selfie, you'll give them a selfie, Pat, won't you? I mean, you'll just indulge the audience with what they want for that hour of brilliant live, you know, DJing.
Well, to be honest with you, David, even if they don't want a selfie, I'll make them have one. So I absolutely insist. And that's where most of my selfies come from the people that go, no, mate, you're all right. And I go, no, really, you do want one. No, you're fine, mate. No, take one, all right? Have one. Have two. Have another one. Have another one. Have a different one for Twitter. Another one for Facebook. One for Instagram. Go on. But when you said that I'm the perfect DJ to finish the night, you're right, because I can clear a place within 10 minutes.
You are being very flippant about your own career, Mr. Sharp, because our listeners should know that you are brilliant as a live DJ, and people love to get those selfies with you. In fact, I should explain to the listeners that we are doing this interview through the power of Zoom, which we all use now. But actually, I can't see you because you're in your radio studio at home. But I have got this wonderful photograph of you, Pat, on the screen with a selfie, taking a selfie with none other than Nile Rodgers.
Okay, so I'll explain that one. Basically, it's not Niall asking for a selfie with me, even though actually, ironically, he did. But that's not because he wanted a selfie with me. He just was doing selfies with anybody because I was doing a warm-up gig for him. And he came on the stage and tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, I'm here, man. I've come on early. And I said, well, you're not on yet. And he goes, I know, I just come to see everybody and wave. And he was doing selfies with the crowd and selfies with me. And then I did a selfie with him and everybody was happy. And then he went off. And then the rest of my set was a bit lackluster because people go, well, what can you do now? We've seen Nile Rodgers. You're not going to be that great now, are you?
Did we mention that you're headlining Sussex Gin Fest on the 10th of July? Did we mention
actually,
that?
At Board Hill, yes. Yeah, I'll be there.
We did.
Yeah.
Board Hill, yeah. I can't finish this interview without without telling you off, Pat, because I've got a bone to pick with you, Mr. Sharp, because one thing that I've learnt in my very short podcast career so far is that you have to load the bases, you have to do the research, you watch the clips on YouTube, you do all the reading. Jack, sitting opposite me, does a lot of the preparation and prints a lot of things out for me to read. And I thought I was being really, diligent, Pat, when I bought your autobiography, paid the 20 quid, and I thought, I'll read that and I won't really need to read anything else because that will obviously give me everything that I need to know about Pat Sharp. I can almost ignore Jack's notes. I can just read that autobiography. I started it over Easter, and there's not a word of truth in it, is there, Pat?
No, it's a spoof memoir. The clue was on the front cover when it says based on an untrue story. So, and that's what's made it so much fun and made it sell so well and be accepted so well amongst so many people. So many famous people have absolutely gone crazy for it and endorsed it, and journalists have gone mad for it, and the guy who writes in The Guardian, I can't remember his name now. He writes about all books and stuff. The book reviewer in The Guardian, his name will come to me in a minute, hopefully, because he's a really nice guy. And he said it was possibly one of the best books he's ever read. So that was really a great accolade from someone like that. And he gave it an amazing review. And somebody from The Telegraph did the same, and actors galore. It's been really well received because it's not an autobiography. It's not a list of things I've done and, oh, I went here, then I lost that job, then I got this job, but I lost that job, and then I had a kid, and then this kid went to school. It's nothing like that. It's just a wild fantasy romp through the eyes of a lunatic that were not my eyes. I say that. Some of the things on there are loosely based on the truth, but was I really hanging out at the Berlin Wall singing with David Hasselhoff and getting Jerry Halliwell to wear the Union Jack dress when I was backstage at the Brits? Well, that's up to the reader. You can decide. I mean, I've been to the Brits, I've been backstage, and I have hung around with the Hoff over the years, but, you know, it's got some, how shall I say, some fantasy, but more fantasy than fact. Fact or fantasy, make up your mind.
Well, do you know what I would say, Pat, about the book? I'm an avid reader, so I as Jack knows, I'm reading all the time, and often, you know, you'll read reviews of books and they'll say things like, it was side-splittingly funny, I laughed out loud all the way through it. And I've gone and read the book and I've thought, I've not laughed once. What are these people talking about? There's nothing funny. I mean, it's remotely amusing. I have to say, with your book, there are absolute laugh out loud moments in your book. I mean, it really made me laugh. In fact, I've not quite finished it. I'm about 3/4 of the way through because I've been savouring each page. I think, of course, I know you, so I sort of know your personality, but I would really recommend it to our listeners. It's a great romp. It is genuinely funny and brilliantly written. I mean, I think it's great. I also read, interestingly, I did read the article, the Guardian article, and clearly he's a massive fan. I read his review and it was very, very complimentary.
Yeah.
And
I should give a quick mention, by the way, David. Just a quick mention, obviously, to Darren and Luke. That's Darren Richmond and Luke Catterson, who Darren came up with the idea to put this book together 5 years ago with me, because he's a kid who I used to drive to school with my boys. We were on the same rota, so one day his mum and dad would take all the kids, and the next day I would, then Monica, and so on and so forth. And he used to sit in the back of the car and just stare at me with eyes like he was Damien from the movie. And I used to think, oh, what's this kid like? He doesn't speak, he's not friendly, gets out of the car, doesn't say thank you, whatever. And apparently he was plotting all along the fact that one day he would write a book with the bloke who hosted Funhouse, because he was being driven to school by the guy who presented Funhouse. And for my boys, it meant nothing because I was their dad, but to him it was like quite exciting. That's why he never spoke. And so many years later, when he became a journalist and wrote for many newspapers, he gave me a call and said, listen, I've got an idea for this book and we want to make it like a spoof memoir and have some fun with it. What do you say? So we chatted about it and went through some ideas, and then him and Luke and me put our heads together, and that was the final result. So Darren and Luke definitely deserve a mention.
Well, Pat, in the style of this interview, you've answered my next question without me even asking it. So, you know, that's the story I wanted you to recount, and you recounted it beautifully. I didn't even have to ask the question, which it doesn't get much better than that.
Maybe on the next podcast, I could just do it myself and you could stay at home.
I'm completely surplus to requirement. There can be no, as I am in most of the podcasts, Pat, to be honest. It's all about the guest. It's all about the guest. Listen, before we let you go, I as you know, on the theme of books and writing, I decided with this podcast that we needed to have a quirky feature at the end. Everybody does a sort of quirky feature at the end of these podcasts. A lot of them are very boring, in my opinion, and I wanted to come up with something a bit more unique. So I decided that I would actually start a story, and every week we'd ask our special celebrity guest to continue the story. The story is well and truly underway. There's been some quite interesting turns with the story, Pat, because it started life as a quintessential sort of whodunit English thriller. And then when we had Robin Cousins on, he introduced an element of let's say, spooky and sci-fi-ness to it. And I'm very intrigued to see where you're going to take it, Mr. Sharp.
Excellent. No, I'm ready. Yeah, you know me.
I'm going to do is I'm going to read the last paragraph, which was beautifully penned by Coco Brown, and then I'm going to let you continue with whatever you want to do, whether it's a word, a sentence, whatever it is, Pat. I'm going to set you up with the paragraph that goes before it, and then let you continue. So, are you ready, sir?
Always ready, David.
He turned, glancing around the room, his eyes darting into each and every corner, scanning every floorboard, searching every shadow, but nothing. It was only then that he realised there was nothing. He hadn't noticed it before. The lack of light, the lack of air, the lack of sound, so worried about being bombarded by the sob stories and the pitiful glances. He hadn't noticed the nothing.
But suddenly he did notice the sandwich, and it looked like it was cheese. But the pickle was nowhere to be seen. He's in a terrible pickle, you know.
Oh, that is so brilliant. That's exactly what we wanted. We haven't had that yet, Pat. We haven't had that nobody's gone in that direction. So that's brilliant.
Good.
Pat, thank you so much for agreeing to be a guest on Schmoozing. I really, really appreciate it. I have to say that was one of the most, certainly one of the most fun episodes I've recorded, as I knew it would be with you, Mr. Sharp.
Oh, well, thank you for schmoozing me, and I will have Mark Wright sent round for Jack.
I love the fact. If we could just change that, Pat, and have Mark Wright sent round for both of us, please. We don't mind sharing.
Greedy boys.
Well, thank you again to my dear friend and the legendary DJ, Mr. Pat Sharp. That was such an enjoyable episode for me. Great fun, and I knew we would have a giggle. Now, next week, folks, we have a very special final episode because we are coming to the end of Series 1 of Schmoozing. So what we thought we would do, Jack and I, is give you some of the clips that you haven't heard, because obviously we record with our special guests and some of the bits don't get to make it into the final episode, but we've kept them and we're going to play a compilation of them for you. So it'll be a great episode, all new material that you haven't heard our wonderful guests talking about. So please, next week, join me for the last Schmoozing of Series 1. Stay safe, stay positive, and stay with me for more celebrity schmoozing next week.